Hello, Armoured Pants here, how's it going? World of Tank Blitz, another tank review for you, the BT-7 full tank review and gameplay, and we have a fantastic game for you with a Resin 9 at 7 kills, mastery badge and all that. But anyway, before we get on to that, let's have a look at the key facts right about this tank. It's a Russian tier 3 tank, it's a light tank, it's third in the Russian line, the new Russian line which they brought in update 5.5. It's preceded by the BT-2. Now the tank itself is fast, good rate of fire, it's agile, terrain friendly, but it has no real armour. Now let's have a look at it in the game in the Russian line. So you've come up, you've gone from the T25 to the BT2, and there it is there, the BT7 in all its glory. Now it's just before the A20, or if you want to go into tank destroyer line, the SU-85B. I'd recommend that you go with the A20 because it's much more similar to the BT7. Because the SU is a tank destroyer and you won't have any experience playing tank destroyers before, and it's likely to end very badly. The BT-7, as I said, it's quite similar tank to the BT-2, but obviously it's better. It's a tier up, but also it just has more round, reliable gameplay. It's much more easier tank to play than the BT-2. You want to upgrade as quickly as possible. You want to get through the modules and upgrade it as quickly as possible. And you know, as we discussed in other videos, you can do that with gold, or you can do it through XP, gain the experience, but try to get upgraded as quickly as possible. Now let's have a look at it in more detail, a full, let's say, tech spec of this tank. If you're fitting it out and you've got all the equipment, I'd configure it like this. I'd use gun rammer, enhanced gun layer, calibrated shells, improved modules, enhanced armor, toolbox, improved optics, improved control, and consumable deliverables, so you can use more often. That's how I set up a medium tank, but that's how I believe a medium tank or a light tank should be set up, because you should be moving around, you should be firing when moving, etc. So that's how I would set it up. But of course, everybody's gameplay is different, but that's just some advice that you might want to take right now. Now the tank has 120 hit points, has a view range of 231, which is important to know because then you can see when and where you are going to be able to spot the enemy, etc. As a light tank, it has enhanced camo numbers, which means your camo is actually working when you are also moving, unlike other tanks, and it's also difficult for the enemy to spot you. And now the tank has 8 degrees of gun depression, 15 degrees of elevation. And in terms of its mobility, it is a very, very fast tank. It gets around the map very quickly. It's terrain friendly, does 44 kilometers an hour going forwards, and there's no map that doesn't suit it. In terms of its armor, well, you can see here, I said it has no armor. It is a light tank, but in actuality, in this front part here and on the turret, if you can angle it correctly and wiggle it around, you will get angles that will bounce some shots for you, especially from the low caliber guns you're going to face against tier 2 and tier 3 tanks. On the back of the turret it's protected as well, but the rest of its arse and sides and all that is very vulnerable. If we look here at how it looks compared to when the enemy spots you, against tier 2s you'll bounce shots in the front because a lot of them have low caliber guns. Against tier 3s probably not, and against tier 4s you're going to suffer if and when you're up tiered. But it does have a bit of armor. It's a small target, so just bear that in mind. And if you're continually moving, using the speed and making angles with the armor, you will bounce some shots. The recommended tactics, they say peekaboo, long range sniping, circle of death, it's good. 1v1 brawl, it is very good, just don't get hemmed in against something heavier. If you can move around, you'll do very well. Frontally doesn't recommend it, but hit and run doesn't recommend. But it's also great for scouting, for spotting up, and for flanking, and you'll see that in the game that I actually play. Watch out for that, how I move around the entire map. Use the speed and the agility to tank to get around the map. Historically, it is a tank that did exist, developed by the Soviets in the 1930s, and at the start of the war it was cannon fodder for the more advanced German tanks who used to blow the shit out of these for fun. You will need to have some APCR shells because the caliber of the gun, it's only 45mm gun. So if you're up against something with a bit thicker armor, you will need that to pen. So load up a few APCR shells, but for most of the tanks you're going to face in tier 2, tier 3, the AP rounds are good enough to get through because they have 95mm of penetration. So Anyway, let's roll. Now that we've had all of this information, we've had a look at the tank, we know its strengths and weaknesses, its gun, etc. Let's see the tank in action. Now, we're on Fortress Bay here, so take note of this map, because this map is the map that you use most often, especially in the lower tiers. So you're going to play in this map more than you're going to play in other maps. So take note of this map if you haven't already. In particular, you can take note of how I use the tank in this map. But even if you're using a different tank or a different tank line, take note of this map and the key points to it. So for example, to go left is where light and medium tanks normally go, heavy tanks normally go right. But if you're more experienced and more confident, and as you get better, you can do what I do here and go straight up the middle. And what we're doing here, oh Jesus, thanks very much mate, appreciate that. What I'm doing here is I'm going straight up to see if I can spot. Now I'm using a bit of cover here. I want to see what's going on. This is something else to note. While the tank is very fast, you can be aggressive in it. It doesn't really have armor, as we said, and you might get lucky and bounce some shots. So therefore, don't really expose yourself until you know where some of the reds are, which is what I did there. So I decided not to go out into the open, into that killing ground, but rather wait and see if I could find where the reds were. Now we know where they are. I know it's safe to move, and now I can use the strength of the tanks, which are of course its speed and its rate of fire. So as you can see, I have a 3.2 second reload, which is a great rate of fire, and I am going to use that to full effect. Now you don't have adrenaline here because it's only a tier 3, you don't have that consumables, so your 3.2 seconds is going to be your reload throughout the game. However, 3.2 seconds is quite a nice reload, and the tank does some nice damage with that. You can see there I got my angles wrong, I got caught up there backing off, but nonetheless we've cleared one tank and I just took one hit. Now what I'm going to do here is, rather than go back and rather than keep myself out exposed all the time, I'm going to use the speed and agility of this tank to rock back and forward to keep myself safe and in cover when I'm reloading, and to only pop out and then only to expose my turret when I want it shot off. You see here now, when I'm against this tank destroyer, what I decide to do is I'm actually giving him a chance to hit me. I'm using the speed agility of the tank to actually just expose myself just for a few milliseconds when I'm firing, so therefore it's very difficult for the enemy to hit me. If you're just coming up and learning how to play the game, be that a lesson to you, keep in cover when you're reloading. Don't expose yourself unnecessarily, because you can keep a whole load of your hit points, as I did there. I could have been quite easily killed there because there's so many tanks coming onto me, but instead by keeping myself in cover I was actually able to conserve my hit points and do damage to the enemy and actually take a couple of them out. Now I'm going to come back around here behind this guy, and again watch this, is the mobility of the tank. I'm just firing, then going back into cover, using the speed of the tank, its agility, to put damage in without actually taking some damage. Now we've got a bit of a hit there. Now this is what they call Circle of Death, if you haven't seen it before, and this is where you come up against a heavy tank or a tank which is a tank destroyer like this that doesn't have a turret, or a heavy tank that has a turret but is very slow. And basically what you do is you use the agility of the tank, and the only thing you need to note is to keep the gun away from you. So you move around, it doesn't matter whether you move backwards or forwards or in a circle. What you want to do is to move around so that their gun is not on you, and you use the speed if you're a tank. And it doesn't matter that you've got no armor, because they're not actually getting a shot on you, so you just use the speed if you're a tank to go around their tank like that. You can practice that if you don't want to practice it in real games, where you run the risk of making a mess of and getting killed. Practice that in a training room with some friends. One has a heavy tank or a tank destroyer, and you just take turns practicing Circle of Death, going around. Some players also call it hugging, because you actually hug the sides of your tank. So you don't necessarily need to drive around in a circle. All you need to do to go around is just make sure that their gun is not facing you. And if you're in a light or medium tank, you can normally do that. Once you get experience at it, quite easily to tank destroyers, especially those without turrets, and heavy tanks who are much slower moving. Now at this point I've killed all 6 of the reds, And then there's his last kill, and I switched to APCR there because I had it in loaded up, and I didn't want to take any risks. So because it was going down to the wire there in terms of hit points, so you don't want to take any risks. Use APCR because you know it's going to pen. So there you are, Mastery Badge, 1.3, almost 1.4k damage, which at Tier 3 is pretty impressive. And a bit of a carry as well, and that I did most of the damage for my team. Some nice praises there for my teammates. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. Another lesson to you guys when you're coming up. Do praise your teammates, you know, especially if they, you know, if they're trying their best, even if they're not as good, you know, do praise them. Because you know, like, it doesn't cost anything to be nice, and you don't get anything in this game for being a dickhead. And there's enough dickheads around, so don't be one of those. So anyway, summary or notes to take away. This is a light tank, relatively no armor, so keep moving, right? Use the speed of the tank, and it makes you very hard to hit, but also lets you to get around the map and to manipulate the map, get in behind targets, etc. The gun has a great rate of fire, as we said, 3.2 seconds, so you can hit the enemy hard and you can hit them often, as you saw in that game. Use the tank to help your team as well, because this is a team game after all, because you can't win on your own. And you may be the fastest tank in your team, so try to spot and scout and flank. And don't be idle, don't just be sitting there, you know, kind of move around, because the tank's asset is its speed. But of course, be careful like I was at the start of the game. Spot the reds. And once you spot the reds up, then the map is yours, because you can move so quickly, you can get from one spot to another very quickly. But, you know, be careful at the start, and then afterwards use those tanks assets, and you'll have a great time playing it, and you'll enjoy the gameplay much more. Now, there you go, that's all from me. Subscribe, follow, or don't, or whatever, and cheers. Thanks for listening. Now, take it easy, Mush. See you now, boys.